while the people in the camps lacked even the most basic supplies.
In war, truth and morality are the first casualties. In South Africa, the brutalized sometimes became the brutalizers. Teddy Williams, a former member of Mkhonto we Sizwe, was sent to the ANC's Quadro rehabilitation camp for taking part in a camp mutiny.
What traumatized me most is to see people being tortured. You see whole family, lots of people, others beaten and their jaws broken, and some there's another colleague of mine was one of the mutineers. He had his skull opened up, you see, with a bayonet during torture. I have a concrete the testimony, see, about one friend of mine that I skipped with. His brother is working at Shell House. It's funny. He was told his younger brother committed suicide. What happened is that he was a security man. He was a former bodyguard of OR Tambo. And they were in this security place of theirs, transit, you see. I think they were drinking, as I understood it, chatting over some beers. And he told them that, but you guys who had done so much harm to your fellow comrades, we're getting back to South Africa, not very long. And some of you are going to have to answer to that. One guy, Mike, just stood up and cocked his pistol and then shot him just like that in the head. They used to beat me in the cell because they used to come in and they say, yeah, this is your last days, you bloody monkey. They beat me with guns and everything. Because I was already, designated to be executed. Shortly after those beatings, the president, OR Tambo, accompanied by Mzwai Philiso and Joe Modise, came to that camp, Kamalunda. When they came and they saw us, we were supposed to stand up, you see. I felt numbed. I simply cried when I saw them because of the thing I saw, the beatings of, your colleagues to that extent.
Torture, too, was a daily thing inside MK camps, and many have spoken of things. And at one point, war broke out against two camps, where heavy numbers were lost and Chris Hani had to go and intervene, after Chris Hani almost got executed himself by a sentence passed by Joe Modise. The money that was supposed to fund an armed struggle was being misused by ANC top brass, living lavishly away from apartheid South Africa. Meanwhile, the ordinary black people claimed to be fighting for had been left fighting apartheid police bullets with stones and steel dustbin lids in the township. They had taken it upon themselves to take apartheid head-on because there wasn't going to be any rescue. Just think of how the Soweto uprising happened. But these are the things you never hear about. The ANC has suppressed them into the dungeons of forgotten history, like another horrendous issue of the normalized of sexual abuse of women in MK camps, a no-go area. Joe went to further sell MK arms without consulting official channels. An official investigation by Chris Hani, who was now chief of staff of MK, led to Modise expulsion. Unfortunately, Chris Hani died 2 weeks before the hearing scheduled for Joe Modise to account.
Joe Modise, Struggle Spook, Becky Jacobs and Chris Hani. Three names which featured prominently at the Seriti inquiry today, and all three are dead. Jacobs has shared information with Patricia de Lille, and his information led to Tony Yengeni's arrest. He was also once arrested for plotting to assassinate Thabo Mbeki.
I was told by the late Becky Jacobs 6 weeks before Mr. Modise died that he was being poisoned and that his death would be ascribed to cancer.
He testified that according to his source, there was animosity between Modise and Chris Hani.
It has been alleged that Mr. Hani was on the verge of exposing Mr. Modise's involvement in corruption relating to the arms deal when he was assassinated in April 1993.
But the arms deal was negotiated and signed in 1999. He then went on to allege a British arms supplier had a hand in Hani's death.
The involvement of Clive Derby-Lewis was merely a red herring to blame the white right wing and so divert attention away from the British arms industry.
Meanwhile, the Modise family is hurt by these claims.
Joe Modise went on to become the first Minister of Defense in 1994 and would be the one to lead the formation of the South African National Defence Force, SANDF, that retained high military positions for all the South African Defence Force, SADF, white soldiers, while blacks were told they lacked experience. We could go back to the decades before, and how the leadership of the ANC was from the late 1940s been blatantly in the pocket of the Jews of the Communist Party who financed most activities. Like Arthur Goldreich and Harold Wolpe were the ones that bought Lily's Leaf Farm. That was to be the first headquarters of MK. It was Joe Slovo who was the first head of MK, for instance. Lionel Bernstein wrote the Freedom Charter. The Jews were the legal counsel in cases of ANC leaders, a big example being Arthur Chaskelson and Joel Joffe, who were two of the three defense lawyers in the Rivonia trial, was Jewish. Arthur Chaskelson later became the first Chief Justice post 1994. Even the head prosecutor of the Rivonia trial, Percy Uter, was Jewish, and he admitted in 1988 he changed the charge of treason to sabotage so that death penalty could be off the cards. Want to know where the Communist Party Jews got money from? None other than the Oppenheimers. This is why CODESA was hosted initially at an Oppenheimer golf estate, and the Oppenheimers themselves are of a Jewish descent, and were funded into power by Nathan Rothschild, who funded Cecil John Rhodes's conquest to Africa and the formation of De Beers that became part of the Oppenheimers' Anglo-American Mining Company. 2 weeks before his release from prison, these were Nelson Mandela's words. The nationalization of the mines, banks, and monopoly industries is the policy of the ANC, and the change or modification of our views in this regard is inconceivable. Black economic empowerment is a goal we fully support and encourage, but in our situation, state control of certain sectors of the economy is unavoidable. Those words were just rhetoric. The memorandum that had been orchestrated all along when the Jews wrote the Freedom Charter in 1955 was enforced that the selling out was definitely going to happen, and he completely changed tune. He changed tune and denied everything he had said later on. In his first post-election interview, as President Mandela stated, "In our economic policies, there is not a single reference to things like nationalization, and this is not accidental." Following the 1994 elections in which Mandela was elected president, the ANC submitted its economic program to Oppenheimer for approval. It was Jews that were tasked with strategic positions of state capture in Mandela's cabinet. The Ministry of Finance given to Gil Marcus in 1994 as deputy minister, whose biggest task was privatization of the South African Reserve Bank, effectively handing away the country's monetary policy to white private hands. All the tasks that are of primary national importance and are cornerstone to a country's economy were privatized under ANC watch and are allegedly owned by a foreign cartel of bankers. The Reserve Bank is undoubtedly the most powerful institution in the country, as Baron Mayer Amschel Rothschild, who is the founder of the Rothschild banking dynasty, aptly put it, "Give me control of a nation's money supply and I care not who makes their laws. Whoever controls the means of production in a country, de facto the money supply, is the one with the real power," and as such the ANC sold out power to capitalists, because it is in the economy where power rests. The ANC surrendered the control of the Reserve Bank to white monopoly capital. Its fate was explained by Vishnu Padechi, who was tasked to draft a document for CODESA negotiating team on the pros and cons of having an autonomous central bank, run with total autonomy from the elected government. He and his team drafted and submitted the document with a clear policy of not allowing the Reserve Bank to be autonomous. He was later told by the negotiating team that they had conceded to the demands of white monopoly capital, backed by IMF loans guarantees, to privatize the Reserve Bank. Following that task, Gil Marcus immediately went to the already privatized Reserve Bank as deputy governor in 1999 and became its governor in 2009. Between state-owned firms were sold by the South African government, summing up to about $4 billion in total. And you never even heard of it once, because it was agreements of CODESA being implemented. It was part of this IMF agreement signed on the 1st of December 1993 to privatize state-owned enterprises to secure a $850 billion loan. Most ANC leaders joined business, the then newly found term for cadreship that was being assimilated into BE positions by white capital as a spin-off of CODESA. By now I believe we know that BE is a concept coined by white monopoly capital, and the first usage of the term black economic empowerment is 1997. We know the beneficiary of Sanlam's BEE, right?
The big corporations in the country were going to look for partners from inside the ANC who would not want things to change.
Exactly.
So what big business came up with, which I must give credit to them, a strategy to neutralize this anti-business, because, you know, they had been exploiting the Africans from the days of slavery, actually, going back to the 17th century. So they knew that black people in South Africa were hostile to them. So they came up with a scheme called Black Economic Empowerment. So with this scheme called Black Economic Empowerment, they then went to leaders of the ANC, especially the ones who were not in exile, the ones who were inside the country. They went to these leaders and said, we are very sorry we oppressed you. We want to repent for our bad ways. So we'll give you some money. You personally, not
the collective.
People. No,
Yeah.
no. You,
Just you, Patrice.
yes, you, Patrice, you, Cyril Ramaphosa, and so on.
Yes.
So they then, Sanlam was actually the leader of this movement. Sanlam had a company called Metropolitan Life, which was a life insurance company. Most of his holders of life policies were African and colored. But it was a big company listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So Sanlam said, okay, you can take over this company. What we will do, we will go to IDC, which was run by one of the Afrikaner guys, and borrow money for you to borrow money from IDC, Industrial Development Corporation. And then you buy shares in Metropolitan and you become the majority voter in this. And then you can pay yourself whatever you want. So they chose these black leaders. So they chose the black leaders if I remember correctly, the head of this black initiative was a man called Dr. Ndato Mutlana. Ndato Mutlana was a medical doctor living in Soweto, and he had been very involved in the struggle against apartheid. From when he was a student at Forte, when so he had been in the ANC Youth League in the 40s or 50s. And so he was a genuine revolutionary. So he put together this team to buy, in inverted commas, because actually they didn't have the money to buy. Then Cyril was one of them. Zwelakhe Sisulu, who the son of the late Walter, was also one of them. Sam Mutsonyane, Dr. Sam Mutsonyane, who set up the African Bank, and he was head of NAFCOC at some stage. He founded one of the founders of NAFCOC. He was also in on the scheme. Who else? There was somebody, I think his name was Mukhali, but I can't remember, from FAPCOS. You see, NAFCOC was pro-ANC, FAPCOS was pro-PAC. Oh yeah, no, they had the Hang Museneke, who was vice president of the PAC. So he was also brought in. Because this is like in the early 90s. So these guys set up this black economic empowerment. Many people naively think that black economic empowerment is there to advance black people. Actually, it's there to do